Muchísimas gracias por sintonizar a Talking Rock en Español. Estamos transmitiendo desde la ciudad más feliz del mundo, Anaheim, California. Yo soy su servidor, Hector Robles, y a mi lado está
Cristian Mejía.
Y vamos a hablar rock en español.
Thanks again for tuning in for Talking Rock en Español, podcast number 20. This time, we have a very special guest, and I'm going to go ahead and allow, Hector's going to go ahead and make this announcement. It's something very important for all of you guitar players out there. So, Hector, take it away.
We actually have a very fascinating guest today, if you ask me. His name is Marty Futara, and he's from Futara Amplification, I believe, or electronic. I'm sorry, what is it for, Marty?
Futara Electronics Company.
There we go. And basically, the way I kind of came across Marty is I blew my amplifier on stage, and it just sounded like crap. So I have a Fender Twin Reverb, an old school one, and I kind of didn't want to get rid of it. So I went to him because I had heard of him from before from some of my friends. We kind of started talking, and it became very apparent that most of us kind of throw the amplifier situation in the back burner, and we kind of just say, yeah, I got my amp, but I have this 59 Les Paul with, original pickups and blah, blah, blah. But it's like, well, what kind of amp are you running? I'm running a little crate that I bought at Guitar Center for $200. And it's like, well, I mean, that's kind of it's kind of retarded, that you're running that with a 59 Les Paul. So it kind of came to my attention that maybe, I learned a lot from just talking to Marty. So I figured, this is probably someone we definitely want to have on the show. And so, Marty, if you can just tell us a little bit of, how long have you been in the business, and a little bit about yourself and how you came across into becoming Mr. Futara himself.
Sure. Thanks a lot. I'm happy to be here.
Thank you for your time.
Well, I got started very young doing this. I was about five or 6 years old, working on junk, basically cassette recorders and whatever. And I'd been repairing some things. Practically all my life. I started working on guitar amplifiers for punk rockers in Fullerton. Guys like Casey Royer and some other guys that I can't remember. I was pretty young at that time, but I had a neighbor by the name of Daniel that had his own group, his own punk band, and he used to invite these guys over, and there was like a bunch of guys that would come over, guys from TSOL, and they would talk to me, and they'd say, "Hey, man, so you fix this stuff?" I'm like, "Not really, but, I guess." So they'd come over with their amps, and they'd come over with some beers and weed and whatever else for payment, and here I am so young, and I'm like, Mom and Dad would be like, "What the hell is this? Who are these guys?" He'd come with their spiked hair and whatever else. So
at this point, had you taken any electronic courses?
No,
or anything?
It was all a hobby. I was trying to play guitar, and I guess punk really wasn't for me. So I didn't really fare too well in the punk rock world because I just wasn't hardcore enough like those guys where I would just start thrashing things and just being punk, I guess, whatever that is in quotes. They just be punk rock, and just be crazy and shit. But I wasn't like that. I was more into blues and that's what I wanted to do. I wanted to play guitar and become a musician. But I had to repair my own stuff because I couldn't afford it. I couldn't afford to go to a tech and say, "Hey, my amp's not working." So I had to fix my own stuff. So, but that's really how I got started with repairing musical instruments. It's just a hobby, pretty much.
How long ago was this? When did you start doing this?
Actually, I got into business about 26 years ago. I was working for another company at the time, and I just wasn't really making the money that I felt I needed in order for me to be on my own, because it's expensive. So I went ahead and started my own company, and it was Futara Electronics Company in Anaheim. I'd been there in the same office for 26 years,
wow.
and yeah, in the same location. And now, we've really blossomed into this company that now supports a lot of professional audio and vintage instruments. I prefer the vintage instruments over any other instrument because they're well made, especially American amplifiers.
So it's not just a theory that if you buy American, you get a better product. It's actually better with the older stuff.
Well, that's a two-sided question, really. If you say, well, buy American all the way, that's not so. I'm not so sure that's.
I guess with the amps, though, the amplifier.
Yeah, I'm not so sure that that's a true statement anymore nowadays, now being now, because a lot of American products say they're American product, but they're really made elsewhere, and maybe in pieces, and then assembled here in America.
Yeah, I've seen a couple of amps where they're like, they're assembled in the U.S., but they're made in Japan.
Or something
Pretty
like
much
that.
what's happening with the car industry, that all the cars are being assembled here in the United States, but they gotten better. Mm-hmm. The American cars have gotten better, and I'm sure that the for guitars and amp is probably the same, but not quite.
Maybe not. I mean, really, if you want something of quality, you'll always have to pay much more for it. So, for example, let's take a Fender amplifier, for example. Now, Hector brought me a Fender Twin, and the condition that it was in, I'll just say okay.
It was pretty burnt up. It sounded like shit.
You made a statement earlier, which is interesting, when you said something of, we take to the essence of saying, we take advantage of what we have, and never really. We always depend on this thing, but we never really pay attention to what it really is, what it's about. We pay more attention to the instrument that we're playing because it's a part of us. It's something that people see us play. They never really see the amplifier. They always see the guitar.
Yeah.
So really, and I think this is the case with your amplifier, when you brought it to me, and servicing it up and getting it working proper is like servicing an old car. You depend on that car. It takes you here and there. But when it doesn't start that one day that you absolutely need it, you freak out because you didn't maintain it properly like you should have. But, in getting your amplifier up and running, and when you came down and you checked it out, you were like, wow, this is what it's really supposed to sound like? Really? Sounds like...
That was actually the whole reason that I'm like, dude, this is phenomenal. Because I had bought some new pickups that I had put inside my guitar, and they're just different, I guess, the pickups that I put. And I thought the pickups were messed up because I wasn't getting the sound that I really wanted. And then once I got that amp fixed, I was like, holy shit, man. I can't believe how good this sound. Is this what it's supposed to sound like?
Yeah.
But I mean, I think another problem with us musicians what we do is that we have a tube amplifier. So we're like, all right, I'm not running, solid state stuff. So you're like, okay, I'm doing a good job. My sound sounds warm, everything's good, and then you come to situations where you just buy the stock tubes that you slap in, and sometimes don't bias the amp, and I mean you just kind of Mickey Mouse situations, and you don't take it to a tech, so you don't know exactly what's run if your amplifier is running as how it should. And another big situation with the tubes is that depending on what sound you want to get, depends on what tubes you're going to be slapping inside your amp. Because a lot of people are like, oh, I have this amplifier, and you're like, but you play blues. Why are you playing through a metal amplifier?
That's right.
And it's the same thing with the tubes. Like if you play a certain type of music, some tubes are better for that type of music than others. So that's exactly why I kind of explained to you exactly what type of music I played, and the shit was phenomenal, man. It was tits. My amp is badass now at this point. So I got to tell you, you completely, even when my amp was running at its top shape that I had it never sounded the way it came out when you redid the cap job on it and put the right tubes that needed to go on it and bias it, did the biasing perfectly. So that's why I was so excited when I heard that amplifier. I'm like, everyone else needs to really pay attention to what they're running. And you're right. Everyone, because your guitar's up front, everyone worries about how pretty that looks. Mm-hmm. But nobody really pays attention to what's in the back. That's really the engine of your sound.
Yeah,
so.
That's right. That's very much right. And referring back to the older amplifiers anyways, like old cars, they do need to be maintained. You do need to buy parts like tires on a car. There are wear parts like tubes. Tubes are the wear parts. And they will dull out just like tires get bald. they will start to dull out for a while. They won't sound as good, so you have to constantly put in brand new tubes and try to keep that sound fresh anyways. But my point here is that a lot of the older amplifiers, people are starting to realize that those are the golden amplifiers to own because they're repairable, they're fully serviceable, you can do modifications on them a lot quicker and reverse them a lot better. I mean, all according to the technician that performs them in the first place, if he's competent anyways and does a really good clean job. The older amps are always better. And that's just my opinion, honestly. More contemporary amplifiers, we'll split them into two categories. There's the ones that are mass-produced cookie cutter amps that are sold for a reasonable price. Those are the ones that end up in the landfill. Whereas the boutique amplifiers, there are a lot of guys, respected technicians that have gone off and started their own companies.
Well, one thing that I've noticed though is when you go to Guitar Center, you see these awesome brands like Paul Reed Smith, or you see that, what's that, a Bogart or a
Bogner?
Bogner, there you go.
Yeah.
You see all these amps that have a really, great name, Vox, but then you look at the back and they're made in China, and they're trying to sell them to you for $2,000, and you're like, this is not a $2,000 product,
Yeah.
And so a lot of us do get fooled by that brand situation. Oh, I want to have a Vox just like the British rockers have.
Yeah.
So I think it's really important to not just go by that name anymore.
Yeah.
And I recently actually went to the amp show here in LA. And I saw the other end of it, which was all the boutique amps.
That's right, yeah.
However, I mean, they have phenomenal work. I mean, their soldering was, point to point, and it was just awesome bitchin' work that they were doing. However, it's $3,000 to $5,000 for an amplifier, which I understand it's a lot of work, but it's out of my price range, and it's probably out of most regular working musicians' price range.
Yes.
So the biggest question that came to my mind was if I'm a normal person, you could probably scrape up $1,000 for an amplifier if you're really serious about what you're doing.
Yeah.
What would you do with $1,000 if you were just Joe Schmo trying to pick up an amplifier to go play shows?
Okay.
What would you do with that?
Well, Joe Schmo could be green and never really played guitar, or Joe Schmo could be the guy that's been playing for a little while. We'll say he's got maybe a year or a year and a half under his belt. He's been playing. So the first Joe Schmo, if he had $1,000, I would say, you know what, just spend $300 and see if you even like what you're going to be doing, first of all. Kind of like what parents do when the kids want to play guitar or something, do you think the parent's going to buy them a full Mesa Boogie rig? No, ain't going to happen. No. So what they do is they go, well, let's do this smart. Let's see if he even wants to play. So they buy him a cheap guitar and they buy him a cheap amp. And so now he's making all this noise. He really likes it. He's actually starting to play songs. Wow, this kid's proficient. Well, Joe Schmo is the same way. Supposing maybe he's 18 or 19, he wants to pick up guitar or something.
Well, I would put it at this: say that the guy knows he's gonna play, and he's just like, well, I'm gonna be gigging around. That's the point of this.
That's the other Joe Schmo.
Okay.
The guy that's been around for a little bit. Now he's got $1,000 and he wants to buy an amplifier. Well, I would say stay away from whatever is sold that you can get brand new for $1,000. And this is just my opinion. The only reason why I say that is because in the end, after the warranty is done, you're going to be stuck with something that's either dead or will continue to work. So my advice would be, why not take that $1,000, go spend $600 to $800 on a used amp, and then have it serviced? Because an older used amp will last, in my opinion, far longer, even longer, getting it serviced properly, assuming that the amp hasn't been bastardized too badly. Because, I mean, we're talking about 30, 40 years of use on a particular amplifier, such as yours, for example. I mean, yours has been around. So
it's been around a little here
but you
and
know
there.
what, man? It came back to life. And that goes for probably about 80 to 90% of a lot of used amplifiers. They're just neglected. Oh, it's old. It doesn't matter. We'll just put it in the garage. Go buy this new one. And then they realize, wow, man, I just heard this other guy play the exact same one, and his sounds phenomenal. So I want mine to sound that way. So they'll invest a couple, $300-$400 in it, and get the new tubes, get the cap jobs, get the proper labor, cleaning up their jacks, lubing up their potentiometers, cleaning out all the rat turds and everything that's in it because it's been sitting in the garage. Maybe a cat has made, their place, whatever. I've seen it all. But, when they get it back, it's actually a working good amp, and it will last them a long time, as long as they follow what I tell them when they pick it up. Just keep it out of moisture, always change your tubes, and be nice to it, and it will be good to you, and you'll have something very dependable. Going back to that old American thing, like old Fenders and Mesa Boogies and older amplifiers, they will work forever if you take care of them.
Wow. Well,
So that's what I would that's what I would say to a guy that's got $1,000. I would say, hey, give me a call, and I'll tell you which one to look for. A lot of musicians have come to me, and we've been on the internet together, and I love doing that. I love looking stuff up. You should get this because I can tell already what type of sound that you're looking for, so I recommend these amplifiers for you. And they're usually something really old, but man, you could get a cool, we'll say this, not so much maybe something from the 70s or the 60s, because those amps are way overpriced and they're going to cost a lot to bring back. I'm talking about maybe something like a Hot Rod Deluxe or a DeVille or something like that. Or maybe if you could find like a Mesa Boogie Tremo Verb or something like that you can resurrect. It's still kind of good, and it'll last for a long time.
So what year are we looking at then? Is that kind of like the 70s, early 80s for those particular amps that you're talking about?
As you know, eBay has really infiltrated our economy in the sense that it's given value to things that really have no value, in my opinion. So, if you were to have something and then, somebody who really doesn't know what they're talking about say, man, that thing's worth, $2,000, you should put it up on eBay. And so it's like, I can't, now the guy that wants to buy an amp for $1,000 can't get that amp, for a reasonable price in order for him to be able to put some money in it and keep it going. So it's kind of like you will find the deals, but you won't, because of eBay. But what I'm saying here is anything vintage, which is over 30 years, somebody has already put a price on it. So, if you got the money, if you got $2,000, go ahead and get that amp. Because if you're going to spend $2,000, make sure it works, make sure this and that. It's still going to need service no matter what. So, if you can try to stay within that 30-year realm, not so much towards the 2012s, 2010s, and 2008s or anything like that, but like 92, 93, somewhere in there. There's a lot of good amps were made during that time. They just need to be worked on. So, I mean, I would say the stopping point would have to be somewhere maybe in 2000. That's when things started to change, and branding is what came alive.
which is basically what you see at Guitar Center nowadays. With you see the beautiful brand, but you're like, that's not a $2,000 amp. Get out of here,
Well, I'll take a company like Vox, for example. I'm a big fan of Vox. I love Vox amp. I own a Vox amplifier. I own an AC50, an old one. It's beautiful, and it works very well. It'll continue to work. But man, I saw a new AC50, and it sounds great. Yeah, okay, but I'm not sure I can trust it. Even though it's brand new, even though this and that, and I look inside, and the parts are like whatever. Unless it's one of Vox's
super elite ones.
Like the hand-wired ones, and then that's different. That's a whole different class of amplifier. A lot of manufacturers are doing that now. That's starting to get popular, where they're like going, we're getting a bad rep here, because we took a well-known brand name and destroyed it, but now we got to do something to make up for that. So they come out with these boutique-style stuff. Yeah, they're $2,000, sure, but you know what? You get the brand, and you get the quality at that point, but you got to pay for it.
But yeah, at that point, if you're spending $2,000 and up, might as well get a boutique amp and you actually get to talk to the engineer, and you're looking at the inside of the amplifier, and seeing all their solder points,
Right? That's what I say too. I mean, there's a guy here in Huntington Beach that does great work, and he will let you do what you just said. Sit there with him, and he's like, well, what kind of sound are you looking for? And you tell him, he goes, we can change these capacitors in here in the phase inverter circuit and open it up a little bit more. Maybe give you some more bass response. We can alter these tone circuits here to get you where you want the mids to be, blah, 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 on and on and on. And you can customize your $2,300 amplifier.
But I think that a lot of people are a little scared of that because they're like, well, I don't have, like $5,000. So they're scared to even ask questions, to even go there. And from what I saw from this amplifier show, I mean, these engineers are more than happy to talk to you about what sound that you want, and even to talk to you about, hey, can you add another channel to an amplifier? Because once you're paying that kind of money, you can pretty much get whatever you want,
That's true.
Once you start going past 2,000. But one other thing too that I've actually noticed, and I guess for me personally, I had a half stack amplifier, and that's another story. I kind of fucked that one up, but one of the things is that I hated hauling that thing around, so I kind of went down to the Fender Twin Reverb. And have you noticed that as well with like the scene that musicians are maybe going to smaller with the amplifiers?
Sure, yeah, that's really popular. In fact, we had a couple of guys come in with Fender Blues Juniors and fully customize those things. Now, those Blues Juniors are only good for maybe 15 or 20 watts. They're very small, low-power amplifiers, but they have a great sound when you turn them up. They have a real brittle, just awesome tone. Well, these guys said, I want every mod that is available for these within reason. So you can change out your power transformer, your output transformer, put in bigger caps, change the tone circuits, put side rails, change the speakers, put different tubes, put mullards in it if you want, like the old mullards, not the new ones that I have no idea what those are. Anything like that, and you have a stomping amp. So if you buy an amp for $300 brand new, you take it to a technician, you spend another $600 on it. So now you've got a boutique amp, almost. The circuit board is the only thing in there that's really holding it back, because boutique amplifiers are generally point to point, with the exception of a few guys like the Bad Cat guys. Some of them, I think they have, in some cases, some PCBs, but all Bad Cat amps that I've seen have always been like point-to-point, very well-built amplifier. That, to me, is probably the best one I've seen so far as hand-built amp.
And how do you feel about the difference between solid-state amps and tube amps? I mean, what's your kind of take on that?
Well, you'd have to ask a young guy and then ask a really old guy. And the old guy's going to say, you know what, I want the solid-state one because that's real light and my back can't take it no more. As far as tone goes, solid-state amps are now like the digital modeling amplifiers, which, you push a button and you get a blackface sound. You push a button, you get a Marshall sound. You get something like that. You know what, man? I'm not into it. I am just not into it. But for convenience, if you go out to play a gig with a solid-state amp, most of the people that come hear you play are here to listen to the music, get into you, and have a great time. They're not critiquing your sound. They're not about that. They're about listening to good music and having a good time. So in that case, great. Solid state is excellent for that. However, in the studio, and you want a certain sound, if you're a very particular artist and you go, man, I love this tube sound out of this amp for my clean sound, and I want this amp and this guitar for my dirty sound, and I want this and that, that's when you get picky with what amp that you want. Tube amps, in my opinion, are gold. They have the godlike sound. They're just really, wow. I own all my amps are tube amps.
I actually play in rehearsal because I rehearse over at our bass player's house, and he has
the solid state one?
Yeah, he's got a solid state amplifier, and it's not bad for a little amp. I mean, it sounds okay, but I mean, when you put it up against the tube amp, me as a musician, I could really tell. I'm like, holy shit, I want to play with that one. And I think a lot of the times too, in order for the musicians to be able to set that mood live, you have to be happy with the equipment that you're running. So for me, I really, really dig the tube amp sound. However, I think it also depends a little bit on the type of music that you're trying to play. Because there's some music like, let's say heavy metal. you might be able to get better sounds for heavy metal with the solid state instead of a tube amp, and it'll probably give you a little less problems as well.
Yes and no. It just depends. I mean, like some solid state amps, I guess that's okay if you're into operational amplifiers that are overdriven. That kind of sound. Some manufacturers are taking actual tubes and putting them in the preamp and overdriving those because they know there's nothing like those beautiful harmonics that you can get out of a tube that's being overdriven. So, I'm with you, I'm not with you on that, as far as the solid state distortion sound. However, there are a lot of black metal bands, the grave metal bands that love that throaty, low end kind of chunk on their guitars and their amps. So right there, that tells me Mesa Boogie triple rectifier amplifier, just totally turned up and just whomping loud and chunky. So that to me is the true metal sound. I mean, unless you're Metallica and you're playing, Marshalls or something like that. I mean, that's a whole different.
But I'm talking about them being sponsors and like money being involved in that situation. Right?
Very true, very true. And I have a lot of things to say about Marshall as well. And
okay, with the situation with a lot of these bands being sponsored, they don't really play the instruments that they're showing on stage, like 12 cabs of Marshall half stacks, and you're like, well, that's not what it sounded like in the CD. They're probably using a small little amplifier up against the wall, and it's almost like they're bamboozling you a little bit,
That's right, and the masters of that, the masters of doing that, it would have to be Marshall Electronics that seems to be doing that, or Marshall Amplification.
You think they're writing on the same thing of like the Eddie Van Halen when they were playing those JMC
the 800s,
yeah.
You mean, or even before that, actually, what Eddie used, which were like the JMPs and the Plexis and stuff like that. Well, now that's a whole different. That's real Marshall, in my opinion. That's the Marshall I totally respect. And
but what
love.
I'm saying is, do you think that they're riding that wave still? Like, oh, look what we made back that day.
Yeah, I think I agree with that. I think what most amplifier manufacturers are doing now, like Marshall, is just they're trying to sell amps, and there's a saturated market right now of guitar amplifiers. So if they get a well-known group and they put their backline behind them of just all Marshall amps with cabinets and whatever else, people are going to see that and they go, oh, wow, he plays Marshall, I'm going to go buy one. Unfortunately, that company is no longer, in my opinion, no longer what they used to be, because it started with the JCM 900 and with these parts that I have no idea. The quality just went out the door with those guys. And I stopped working on Marshall in the late 80s because all of the stuff that they made prior to that, such as the JCM 800s, the JMPs, the older ones, the 50 watts and 100 watt leads, those were all beautifully made amplifiers. It's hard nowadays to try to find a stock one because during the mid 80s, people, including myself, were modifying the hell out of them, punching holes in chassis, adding tubes, modifying the tone circuits, doing all these things. So we pretty much trashed them, I would have to say. It's hard. If you can find a JCM 800 that's stock, it's worth a lot of money and it sounds beautiful. So, but anyways, getting back to your thing with backline, yeah, that's very true. It's not just Marshall though. That's true with a lot of manufacturers, but
do you think they're just trying to hit the like the Christmas buyers where the mom and pops just kind of show up and they're like, well, I see this picture of Metallica and they have these amps. My son likes heavy metal. I'll just buy that amp, but I'll just buy the little small Marshall with the fun pack that you buy at Guitar Center. Do you think that maybe that's the marketing end on those?
Again, I think they're just trying to sell amps at this point. I think it's really more corporate run companies now of branding, and there's no more of this there's no more mystique anymore in these brands that you see pushed anyways. And as I said before, most manufacturers now, the reputable ones anyways, have their custom or boutique lines, and then they have their whatever you call it line for mom and dad to buy $100 this and that for their kids. And that's fine, because if that's what the purpose is, then I'm behind it 100%. But if you're marketing that to musicians that play and deceiving them, thinking that you're going to get the same quality as from before, paying that low amount of money, I'm not for that.
One of the things that I've noticed because for a little while I was looking into maybe possibly buying another amplifier, and that was one of the things that I was looking at. I was thank God that there's the internet and you could actually look up reviews and hear different things of different amps. But one of the things is like I was really disappointed with what you could get with your money now for a brand new amp.
Right.
It was just, I mean, I don't know. To me, it's not it's a lot of crappy stuff that they have, man. And a lot of it, I'm not saying that everything made in China sucks, but with amplifiers, from my experience, I mean, it's horrendous, dude. And one of my cousins purchased an amplifier from Guitar Center, and it was an Epiphone, a little small valve one, and he just played the shit out of it. I mean, he wasn't going touring or doing anything. He was just in his garage, just having fun. And literally, I think it was almost as soon as the warranty went out, which was 1 year, the thing took a shit. And it was like the transformer or a big part that was in there, and they were charging him basically what the amplifier cost in order to get it fixed. And he's like, I'll just go buy another amplifier. And I think that's kind of what's been going on with these companies, which is a little sad, but I mean, I guess nowadays you get what you pay for, but you still have to be very careful because sometimes they'll overcharge you for the items that you think that brand was really good, but it's no longer there anymore.
Well, it's like I said, amp companies are trying to sell amps, and in a now economy where people are a bit more frugal with their monies, they don't really want to spend a whole lot of money. So I think a lot of corporations, amp corporations or musical instrument corporations, I'll say, are kind of tailoring what they can sell to the frugal-minded mom, dad, or musician or whomever. So I kind of try to stay out of that market because it's a reflection on what I do. If something comes in and I can't fix it, there's a whole lot of some things that I can't fix, and I want to be able to fix them, to repair them, service and maintain them. And so that's why I stick with vintage instruments. But there is a whole thing about deceit anyways, and I'm not going to mention any stores or anything like that because that's not really what I'm here to do. I think my whole purpose owning a service company is to enlighten the buyer or anyone who wants to purchase instruments to check out the company, see if they have a support section with actual authorized service centers, a lot of them, or maybe a few guys, just depending on the size of the company and how many amps they sell and blah, blah, blah. So if they've got a heavy support group, that's the company you want to go for. So we'll take, for example, the Fender company, for example. They support their instruments very, very well. They'll do anything to keep the customer happy within reason. I mean, if the customer is unreasonable, and it's really not a lot you can do. But based on that reputation of a company being so supportive of their instruments, I reflect that as well. If somebody calls me, yeah, I got this and that, it's brand new, and it failed, and I know what it is, and Fender knows what it is, and the customer only paid $300 for it, it doesn't matter. They're going to support it. They're going to give them a brand new one. They're going to do something for the customer. That, to me, is support. If you go to Brand X, some other guys, there are no service centers on their site. They're like, okay, click on this email link, and we'll get back to you whenever we feel like it. And meanwhile, you just spent your $400 on something that you can't use. And you've got gigs, and that's how you make your money. You're a working musician. So that's why I kind of try to stay out of that market.
One other question, because I know that you did a little bit of touring around or tour support possibly behind stage, right?
Well, yeah, I did work backstage for a while, but mostly supporting other groups through a union. And
Tell us a little bit about that, because
Yeah,
I heard
okay.
you had some good stories on that.
Yeah, I've got one that's pretty good that I'll never forget. Anyways, it's
And
it's all
I
good.
hear it involves chicks, butts, and cocaine. Is
No,
that true? No?
no, not here. Not with me. Anyways, maybe with them, but not with me. It's all business with me. So I did a lot of backstage support, backline work for groups. Indirectly, I'm going to say this right now. I don't know any of these guys. I don't know any of the artists. I don't know them personally. I've never partied with them. I've never talked specifically.
Look at him, he's putting his
with them.
disclaimer out. Go
I
ahead,
have
go
to
ahead.
do that because people are like, "Oh man, you know Joe Walsh? Whoa!" It's like, no, I don't know Joe Walsh. I don't know old Joe. I spoke with him very briefly on the phone, and it was like, "Can you do this?" Yeah. Okay, great. I'm gonna pass you over to this other. Or this other guy's gonna call you. It's like, okay, now I do my business with them. So really, that's about it. And there are other guys that I've worked with directly as well. And they were pretty cool. I'll mention a couple of guys that I did work with. But anyways, so I did a lot of backstage work through this union for groups like Love and Rockets and New Order and Julie Andrews and Elton John, the Sugar Cubes. A lot of groups, a lot of different groups. Tesla, Whitesnake, some old metal groups.
Bringing back memories with old White Snake. Huh?
Yeah. Metallica. Who else? Bjork. I got to see what she was, and she's cute. She really is. She's a pretty girl. And but you know what? No one talks to her. No one talks to her. No one looks at her. I mean, she is a queen, but she's cool. A lot of these groups they'll provide you, or their companies, anyways, the ones that support the groups or whatever monies they put into them, they'll feed you and they'll give you alcohol if you want it or whatever. I never took any of that stuff except maybe a couple donuts or something to get the sugar high to work. But there's a big myth about backstage work where people will say, "Oh man, you were backstage, man. Did you party? Did you do this?" I'm like, "No, man. I worked. I got dirty, and I got hurt." And that's really the truth.
And what were you doing backstage? Were you fixing
mostly
stuff? Or?
No, setting up backline mostly. Speaker cabinets, hooking them up, moving consoles here and there, picking up the snake, which was the most
Pretty much roadie.
Yeah,
you were doing the roadie
basically,
work, right?
Yeah. We're working. We have gloves. We get filthy dirty from this stuff. And let me tell you something. One of the things you don't want to do is put a snake away, because that is the dirtiest job. I mean, there is beer and who knows what all over that cable going from that console, all the snaking all the way down through the audience and right up onto the stage. It's like, wow. But those are things that we do.
And not to mention heavy.
Yes, heavy. I've seen guys get hurt. I've seen ambulances come to pick them up. At one point, I believe for Elton John, we were stacking up these cabinets called S4s, and we had to do it fast because some people were being a little unreasonable, like the stage managers and whatever else. They're like, "Hurry up, we got to get this done." It was for Julie Andrews, that's right. Miss Andrews has to, or Ms. Andrews has to, get it. She's only got a window of time to do, go and sing a couple of songs, and then she's ready, and everything has to be ready and whatever else. So these guys are with forklifts, man. These things weigh a lot of poundage here. We're talking about maybe 300-400 pounds, of speakers. I mean, stacked all the way up, and one guy, we're setting him down. One guy got his hand caught between 3 up and 1 down, and it really smashed him up pretty good. I seen another guy get literally thrown back by a winch and some heavy equipment. So, I mean, it's a dangerous job in that sense, but you got to be careful. Like anything else, I've seen sparks and electrocution stuff, not with people, but just things blow up, amps just go boom, And
Have you ever worked in like the Latin section of like backline setup and stuff like that? And if you have, I've just kind of wondered, do they work different in the Latin community as opposed to the English community at all?
I've never really done any work for any Latino groups or bands or anything like that. Most of the stuff that I did was back in the early 90s. So it was mostly alternative groups and whatever was going on at that time. mostly at what was known as Irvine Meadows at the time,
Yeah.
or Pacific Amphitheater. I did work for some Broadway shows like Cats and some other plays. I mean, I was so disinterested.
He was one of the cats in the little spandex suits.
That's right. Yeah. Well, there are those guys that actually got those gigs. I didn't, but we had to dress that way, and they're called blacks.
Get out of
And
here!
what they have-
Really?
Yes, they're called blacks. And what you do is you wear basically all black. Everything is black. And if you had a turtleneck and you had everything coming down to here, down your arm, that's black. That's great, because that set, it has a black background, and if something falls over or something, you got to run out there and pick it up and do whatever. But you can't be seen doing it because of what's going on stage, unless it's like something that happens out in front. Then obviously you have to run out and do that. So all of us had to wear that kind of stuff, even if we whether we were used or not to do those kinds of things. But anyways, so going back to the Irvine Meadows stuff and the other places. So that's really the myth, is that they think that everyone's partying and just having a good old time, and it's really not. It's good, just dirty, hard work, and you don't have any time to try to engage yourself with any of the artists or anything, because they're well secured anyways. They're off doing whatever they're doing, or they're not even there. Like, for example, Elton John, that was amazing how their show was so well done. So we go in there, we set everything up, everything is perfect, and there was a red carpet that went right from, and this was at Performing Arts Center. There was a red carpet that went right where his limo parked, all the way snaking through backstage, all the way up onto his piano bench. And so everything started, the audience was there, everything was going on, the band starts up, they're playing whatever. Man, his car drives up like clockwork right there. He gets out, he's a small guy, and he's just walking right out, and there's some bodyguard there telling everybody to back the F up and whatever else, And he just went right up, started playing. Boom, the first note, he just sat down, starts singing a song, does his whole show. It's done, does an encore. He's up and out down that red carpet again, right into the limo, and he's gone. Gone. That's it. I mean, that's his show. There were other shows, like there was this guy that used to work with us, and he was a Mexican guy, and I befriended him, or he befriended me, because I was really the only guy there that I guess was willing to talk to him or something. He was green. He didn't know anybody or anything. He was just one of these guys. And so during a Love and Rockets show, we were sweeping up and doing whatever we do. It's like everybody's milling around because it's the end of the show. It's during the encore anyways. And we're getting ready for the strike. So that means to take everything off a stage.
Okay, I was going to say, wow, you guys going to strike right in the middle of the show?
The strike is when you take everything off stage and pack it all back into the trucks, and then they're off to the next show. But so the encore is going on, and one of the performers in Love and Rockets is playing a saxophone, has these long legs and stockings and big hair and looking real sexy. So Manolo, is looking at this. He's like, "Está buena." And I go, "Oh yeah, you like that, huh?" And he's like, "Está muy buena." And I go, "Okay, well, I'll introduce you. I know that person." He's like, "Ooh," he's really excited. His heart's pounding. It was so sad. He was really into it. Okay, so at the end of the show, they get off stage and they're walking towards the stairs. And I go, "Come on, let's go." So we're fast pacing it there. And I go, Daniel. I go, "This guy is a big fan of yours." He's like, oh, right, enjoy the show. And he kept walking. And Manny had these big eyes because it was Daniel Ash. It was looking all good and girly.
Mira esa mamacita. Nice.
Yeah, so...
Wow.
It was pretty funny with that guy. He was a good guy, though. I liked him a lot. I never saw him again after like maybe 6 shows. We were all union members that were basically called casual members. So we got calls when we got calls. Whereas the regular members had steady work all the time. So they went to every show. They even did shows in LA for bigger acts and bigger venues like the Rolling Stones or the Who at the time or something like that. So, wow. But I never did any of those shows.
Well, one other thing, I guess, getting back to the amps a little bit here, what like models or not models, I guess, what mods would you even suggest to do on amplifiers? And I mean, I'm just throwing that one out there because I mean, I'm sure you're going to go, well, what type of music do you play and what are you looking for?
Well, there are modifications that should be done on all amplifiers. It's like, you know, when you buy a car and you've got, you know, some crummy tires on it, they're only going to last you probably 20,000 miles. So the first thing you do when you buy a guitar or you buy an amplifier is you change the tubes, you change the pickups. Those are the first things you do. You get it set up. You put money into it to make it perform the way you need it to perform.
Well, what would you suggest, like basic mods on an amplifier? I mean, just whatever example you want to give would be when you purchase one.
On Fenders, we all know that Fenders are clean. They're clean amplifiers, at least the older ones I'm referring to, like the Twins and the Pros and Quad or anything like that from the 70s or even early 60s, blackface amplifiers, basements. They're all, and Showmans too, they're just clean amps. There's really no overdrive in them. But some guys want a little bit more edge out of their sound because we're in modern times now. We're not really all playing surf music. You know, we're playing a bit more heavier blues and rock. I think what's popular now is more country rock or southern rock, you know, something with a little more edge to it as opposed to metal, which is the extreme.
Yeah.
So, but you wouldn't use a Fender for that anyways. So these guys just want something a little edgier. So like in a Fender, we do what's called a feedback mod. And the feedback mod involves just replacing or altering resistor in the feedback path of the power amplifier, which opens it up a little more. Also replacing some caps, capacitors that is, in the phase inverter section as well, to open up the power amp, because really that's where the sound is. The preamp tailors your tone, but your amplification is really coming through that phase inverter in the power section. So you want to make sure you've got some quality components there. Those are modifications that I would always recommend for Fenders.
A lot of people talk about the preamp tubes that, oh, you got to get this changed, you got to get blah, blah, blah. Mm-hmm. What's your perspective on preamp tubes and like what tubes would you use for a little bit, say, dirtier, and what tubes would you use for a cleaner sound?
Well, that's a good question because I usually refer a lot of people, I do talk to them, and I refer them to to tailor their needs of what they want anyways. I try to send them in the direction that when they talk to me, if they want this or if they want that. So, for example, a customer comes to me and says, I need a really clean sound. One guy, he's a performer or a guitar player for a group called the Tequila Worms.
He's a local boy. They always perform at the juke joint.
Ulysses is his name. Really great guy. But he told me specifically, he goes, look, we're a surf band with a little bit of edge. So I need kind of like a warm, clean sound, but I want a little bite with it. So I go, okay, tubes. So let's set you up with something that's going to give you a little grind when you want it, but still stay clean for the sound and to tailor for your band anyways. So we went with the Sovtek output section and also with a combination of Sovtek and JJ preamp tubes.
See, that's a little interesting for me because usually when you buy tubes, most of us will buy it in a set. We're like, all right, we're going to get the whole set. But it's interesting that you say you mix the tubes to get the sound. So if you can just elaborate more, I just wanted to kind of mention that a little bit because...
Yeah, I mean, mixing tubes is always the better way to go, especially if you've got a two-channel amplifier and one's clean, the other one's dirty. Well, of course, in the clean, you want the cleanest tube, and the dirty one, you want a good dirty tube for that. His amplifier wasn't like that. It was just a standard silver face Fender, and his was a Super, I believe. So he wanted something for both channels to be kind of edgy. Both channels sound different anyways. One is a little harder than the other, but to have some different tubes here and there to kind of give you those tones where you can, those distinguishable tones where you can tell something super clean or something super edgy. It's nice to have that combination of tubes in there. Whether you have the Sovtek clean tube or you have the JJ brighter, kind of more distorted tube, maybe. JJ tubes are good too in the clean sense, but I think they're a little bright, so I tailor those. I'm sorry. I like to install those tubes in amplifiers that require a little more bite or edge to them, or for the client anyways.
If you can explain to us a little bit about tubes as well, about the manufacturing, because a lot of people are like, oh, this is a completely separate company, or these are these kinds of tubes. And then I heard somebody saying they all pretty much come from the same factories. It's just they slap a different label on them.
Well, see, you're talking about two different things here. There are very few tube manufacturers in the world right now. The major factories, there are two in Russia. There's one in the Czech Republic, and then there are two, I believe, in China. The main one in China is the one that's actually making them for a lot of amp manufacturers, anyways, or that the amp manufacturers use those tubes out of that company. So the ones that we all know about, that everybody hears about, the ones that are mostly branded are groove tubes, or some new ones that came up. Tube Amp Doctor's another one, and there's Euro Tubes and all these. These are brands, and Ruby is another one as well. Mesa Boogie has their own brand. So there's all these brands, but then there's the manufacturers. Who's making the tube? Where do they actually come from? So I make it a point to study the tooling within those glass envelopes to see what they are. So if you buy a groove tube or you buy a Euro tube and you look at them both, and they're both stamped, different silk screen on them, but yet the tooling inside, that'd be the metal and everything, the configuration of what's inside that part, look identically the same, you know that they're coming from the same factory. Now, which batch they are, who knows, but they are coming from the same factory. So I like to base my tubes, what I sell to people, based on country of origin more than the brand. Now, the brands, like Groove Tube and Mesa Boogie and whomever else, they have their own testing techniques. So although they come out of a certain country in a batch, those companies will take them, those different companies, Ruby,
sort them out.
They will sort them out. They will run through their own custom testing and matching, and then package them and sell them. So what you buy at a major retailer will be a certain type. A lot of big companies are selling groove tubes. So when you go and you pick up a groove tube, you're kind of like, okay, they're groove tubes. They made them. No, they didn't. They branded them. They tested them and branded them. Really, that's all they did. So when you pick up Mesa Boogie the same way, they did not manufacture those tubes. They have no tube manufacturer under the Mesa Boogie name, nothing like that.
They just bought them and put their sticker on it.
Well, not so much like that, because all of the tube branders, they have machines that burn them in, test them, they hammer on them, they do everything they can, run super loud signal through them, whatever they can to get them to fail. And the ones that pass are the ones that are sold to us. So that's really what you're getting. But every brand is different, has a different method. My favorite, what I use that has been the most reliable, and that's after my own testing, and that's hitting them with soft hammers and blasting them and over voltaging them and just doing all this stuff to try to kill tubes, has been the Mesa Boogie brand. Now, they're a combination of I can't tell you, but they're a combination of different, they come from a lot of different places. They're not custom made. They're not anything like that. I mean, they may have some tweaks that they've ordered, through these companies that make them unique to what they use, but they didn't make them. So I find a Mesa Boogie tube to be extremely reliable. And that's really what I'm all about as far as service goes. I try to make amplifiers when I service them amazingly reliable as they can be. Sovtek is another brand distributed by Mike Matthews in New York, and that's another reliable brand of tube. Now, who is matching them? He does them, Ruby does them, Mesa does them. A lot of places sell a Sovtek. Groove Tube does them as well. But who does it the best? And that's really the question. Who's the most reliable? Where can I get a set of tubes, or who's branding a set of tubes that is the most reliable set of tubes based on their testing? That's really what we're talking about. And there are certain ones that are good, you know.
And do you want to mention any of those brands that you found that were good? You said it was Mesa Boogie. And
I'll say what we sell. Mostly, if you want a Sovtek tube, I find that Ruby is pretty good. I mean...
And Sovtek is basically a little bit dirtier, right?
Well, Sovtek is a brand that is distributed by that New York company, Mike Matthews' company. And he's... he gets them from his factory in Russia. Now, he's the one that's manufacturing these.
But I guess my question was, though, regarding the sound of the tube. It's a little dirtier sound with the Sovtek ones?
No, the Sovteks are super, super clean, super reliable, super Russian, just tanks, basically. Thick bottle glass, thick metal. I mean, you can throw anything at them. They are tough, real tough tube. But they are limited in power and amplification, but they're clean. They're just dead clean. I put them in Fenders because that's what they're made for, at least the more contemporary Fenders. The older ones, we have to modify the bias circuits a little bit in order to accommodate that tube, but they work and they're good.
Well, one thing actually that I'm so excited. I'm asking all these different kinds of questions. I didn't actually get the direct answer for the preamp tubes.
Okay.
Are you looking at like what the clean sound and the dirty sound? AX7s would give you what kind of a sound?
Okay, well, an AX7 is actually just a part number, and each manufacturer has their own 12AX7. So whatever the pinout is that would fit in the socket to work is really that number. Whatever it does, a 12AX7 is a dual triode tube. That is your gain stage. That's your amplification stage, your pre-amplification stage, I should say. So a Sovtek 12AX7 is a dead clean tube, in my opinion. Whether you get a WA or a WC, there's not a whole lot of difference between them. Some guys say the WCs are high gain ones, but they're high gain clean. Okay. What does that tell you? However, the JJ12AX7 is bright and it has a lot of gain in it and is actually a pretty good tube. There used to be a company, and I don't know if they still exist, but when I first opened my shop, a guy approached me selling tubes, and they were right out of China, out of the, there's a factory out there I can't even pronounce. They're like Shigwang, something like some weird. Anyways, but they were making these tubes that were distributed by a company called Penta Labs. And those 12AX7s were the best I ever heard. I mean, aside from the old school Mullards and Yugoslav smooth plate 12AX7s, these were such an acceptable replacement that I tried to buy as many as I possibly could. I spent all my money buying these 12AX7s from this guy.
Wow.
And I mean, I got them low as... I was buying so many of them. I mean, I was getting them for less than probably a dollar a piece. I was buying so many, and I was selling so many of those. At that time, this company was trying to sell tubes, so they were selling them for a steal. I mean, you couldn't get a 12AX7 for under $20 now. That's good, anyways. You could find the $9 ones, yeah, but really,
what's that going to give you?
How long is that going to last, really, and who did it, really? But back then, man, those were really good tubes. And if you can find a white label Pentalab tube, a 12AX7 with that cool like pentagon logo with a P in it, those are really good. And I can't find them anywhere. They don't exist.
So which one would be the dirty one then that we're looking at?
If you're talking about high gain, which equals dirty.
Yeah.
If you want high gain tube, I would say the JJ is a pretty good high gain tube. I've experimented with Mike Matthews' tongue sole tubes and his Mullards. Surprisingly, they're pretty good. They're very round sounding, and they are high gain tubes as well. But I don't know. I still stick with what I sell. And it would have to be the JJ, in my opinion. A little bright, but if you can mix it with other tubes, like if you had a JJ 12AX7 in your preamp and you're getting a dirty sound out of that, you follow it with a Sovtek, and that tames it. rounds it out. So that combination creates a unique sound.
So I mean, basically, at all these points, this is the reason you should take your amp to a tech, because I mean, all these little things are so important to your sound, and you know, us as musicians, we want to make sure we have our own sound. We don't want to sound like Eric Clapton because there's already an Eric Clapton, you know? Wow, is there any questions you might have for him, Christian? You've been kind of
Just,
quiet today.
Well, I mean, this is kind of more of, your end, the guitar and amplifiers. But I guess one of my questions that I have for you is, do you build your own amps?
That's a good question. Now, there have been a lot of things asked of me to do, and people are pushing me in that direction. I don't want to go there. The market is saturated with amplifiers, and they're getting smaller and smaller and smaller and more affordable and affordable. And yeah, I guess I could build some, but that's not what I'm about. Maybe I'll build a couple for myself, to enjoy, but I just can't get into that business of manufacturing and selling amps. And I'll tell you why. Because I have a lot of friends in the industry, and it would be considered a conflict of interest if I started building amps, because they trust me with their designs, and I can't do that.
So that would be more like a copyright violation.
Well, it'd be a violation, ethical violation.
Well, I mean, because I'm saying, because you know the patterns, their blueprints,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
So they would feel like, hey,
Yeah, what are you doing here?
Exactly.
I looked at your schematics, and this is something I did, and I could be a jerk and just say, F you, but I'm not going to do that, because, in this business, you love everyone and everyone loves you. And
It is actually a really small community.
Yeah.
I actually, when I went to that amplifier show, people recognized me from the NAMM show, dude. I'm like, what? Like, it's such a small community that, I mean, everyone knows everyone, and it's very interesting, actually.
Yeah, I mean, there are some toes I suppose you could step on if you really want to be disrespectful, but, I'm not really about that. I want to help. I want to be here to service. And that's really what I do. I'm more of the guy that you bring me something that's not working, and I'll make it happen for you. I will try to make it happen for you. But I'm not in the business to build amplifiers or things like that.
No, well, it definitely shows that you have a lot of passion for the work that you do.
Mm-hmm.
I'm here listening to you, and I look at you like an artist also, because what you do is an art. You define, these little, what to do, what kind of modifications to do to
That's
these
right.
amplifiers. And you're also helping an artist develop a different
their own sound, man.
Develop their own sound. So that makes you very special, very valuable to you and all the other engineers, technicians like yourselves.
Let me tell you what actually impressed me about this, Christian.
He came in very happy, by the way.
This is what impressed me about him. Usually you take your amplifier somewhere, and they're like, I'll call you in 2 months and let you know what's wrong with it. I swear to God, dude, they take for fucking ever, dude. I'm not even messing with you. I've had other stuff serviced like that, and they take forever to service your amplifier. So when I took it to him, the first thing that impressed me was the fact that he told me, he started discussing with me the tubes. And he's, what kind of music do you play? Because he actually cares about your tone and your sound of what you want to get out of that amplifier, instead of just saying another $100 just walking in through the door. And to me as a musician, it made me, well, I'll tell you this much. It made me feel like, you know what? He's asking me the questions of exactly what I want out of my amplifier. And this is the guy I want to bring my shit to for the rest of my life.
So it's basically, he became your amplifier, saying, "Hey, Hector, this is what I really need. I'm down." And
well, he asked
right?
he asked the questions that most amplifier guys don't. Most of them, what's wrong with it? Well, the speaker blew out, or my tubes are going out. Okay, come back later. I'll fix it. I'll take a look at it and fix it. But he actually asked me about my sound, like, well, what are you playing? And, I started explaining to him, well, I play this and I play that, a little bit of funk, a little bit of, I hit my distortion pedal. And so I want to be able to, dirty up this amplifier a little bit. How I know it's a super clean amp, but how do I do this? And, he pulled up in the computer and he's like, well, check out these tubes. These tubes right here will give you this, a little bit of a dirtier sound. And then once he gave me the amplifier, he's like, I mixed and matched some items, some tubes on the amp, because just buying all straight JJs all the way across or Sovtech across is gonna give you a bland tone, but he actually sat down. He, put different types to make sure I got the sound that I wanted. And like I told you, I've never heard that fucking amp sound like that.
That actually, I can relate to that as far as, I play drums, but I would have to say that what he's just saying, I can translate it with the cymbal situation, because I love Silgens, but I adore, Istanbul cymbals. Totally way different, and I could have this brand here, this brand there, and so on. So I can totally relate to that, what you guys are talking about now.
I understand that as well, man, because, I love drums, and I've recorded drums, and I've set mics up for drums, and, if you have the right woods, the right heads, the right sticks, and even your method of playing, there's an infinite amount of sounds and tones you can get out of drums. Even with cymbals, whether you play these Paiste or Zildjian or whomever else. All these beautiful harmonics you can get out of just one cymbal, just sitting there all over it, and just, so I can relate with you in that respect too, because I'm a drum lover.
Well, and that's exactly why I wanted to bring Marty in, because of these situations with us, as especially I feel that in the Spanish rock community, it's even less, like, the musicians pay attention less to their amplifiers. I'm talking about, the working guys around the corner. The big guys, they're on a different level because they can shell out as much cash as they want. But, us working musicians, here around, in Southern California, I see these other guys and I'm like, dude, I love your songs, dude. I'm a fan of other bands that I play with. I'm like, fuck, I love your shit, dude. That's a cool fucking song. But fuck, man, that amplifier's gotta go, dude. Like, yes. And I'm just honest, I'm not trying to be a dick to the guy. I'm just like, dude, you have to change that amp, man. I love your fucking song, but you gotta change that. And and it's different bands that I've told that to. Sometimes they get pissed off at me and they're like, fuck you, I guess I'm just honest, and if he doesn't like the comment,
Well, honesty always hurts, man.
Yeah.
Well, and that's why I felt that it was extremely important to bring Marty in. So, other musicians that are listening, they're going, fuck, I do pay a lot of attention to my guitar, but maybe I should invest in taking it in and get it serviced by, if not Marty, by somebody else. But as long as they get it, serviced and that they talk to the guy and tell him, this is what I want out of my amplifier. They might just tell you, fuck, don't even fix this, dude. Go get this, because if that's what you're trying to get, you're never going to get it out of this amp, So, I don't know, man. That's, with that little situation, we're going to go ahead and wrap up the podcast. And
okay. Can I say one more thing?
Sure.
I want to make a comment regarding artists and how I feel about artists. Artists are definitely a breed, an animal of person anyways. They don't think like a rational person would, like a normal person you would think. Conventional, I'll say that. That's a better word. Conventional
He's
thinking.
trying not to offend us,
No.
Christian.
But, I like that word artist because a lot of engineers that I know are artists. And a lot of technicians I know are artists as well. I don't want to say that about myself, but I sure do.
But you are, Marty.
Well, I wish I was, really, because the best example I can use as far as a musician artist would be, I think his name is Anton, and he's with a group called the Brian Jonestown Massacre or something like that. And he was in a movie that I recently saw. I guess it was called Dig.
Love him. I know who you're talking about.
Yeah, I think his name's Anton. Anyways.
Yeah, it is.
In my opinion, that guy is the ultimate artist. And he has no clue what's going on in the world. He doesn't care. All he cares about is what he does. And that is inspiring to me, that young guy anyways, because he's so focused on what he wants to do, and he doesn't care who he offends or who he pisses off, which is why that group has so many problems maintaining a membership, and keeping his players, except for one guy who plays tambourine or something.
Okay, the tambourine player never quits?
He doesn't. He's always there, and he dances too, I guess, or something. But anyways, that Anton guy, he has to be like the Jesus Christ of artists. Now, I'm not going to offend offend any Christians, okay, with that word, all right. But really, honestly, that he is clueless to everything else except for what he does. I know a lot of engineers and technicians that are, I mean, they're analytical thinkers, but they're similar to that. And
well, it is an art with engineers as well, man, because they can make you or break you at a show. I mean, I've seen recently we saw a show where this band, I mean, they were pretty good, and we heard the sound, and it was just it actually ruined the show, if you ask me.
I agree with you 100% right there, because some guys, I like to think of audio engineers as sculptors. And what they do is they get up on that board, and if they know the console real well and they know their gear really well, they can make any band that sounds like garbage sound so professional, because they sound shape and sculpt the sound to where it's listenable.
Yeah.
And it ain't too loud and doesn't hurt. And they can do anything on stage and it still sounds good. And I'm entertained, and that's what I'm here for. So
well, if you can, Marty, if you can tell us exactly where people can find your website and services, so they can, if they want to fix something, so they can check it out.
okay, well, I'm located in Anaheim near Disneyland. The website is www.futara.com. That's www.futara.com. You can send me an email, service@futara.com. Just ask me a question, and I'll respond.
All right. Well, Marty, thank you once again, man, for being on our podcast, and we're really happy. I'm really happy that you fixed my amp. Thank you. I was very, very happy, and
You're welcome.
Hopefully the rest of the people who are listening, can pay a little bit of more attention to the amp, because it is the engine of their Ferrari that they're driving. So, hopefully we were able to bring a little bit of light into the situation. Like we said, if you have any questions, you can check out futara.com and ask Marty any questions that you might have, or if you're looking at purchasing, an app that you might want to get serviced, or whatever the situation might be. We want to thank all of you guys for listening, and anything you want to close out with?
For sure. Just definitely pay him a visit, at www.futara8.com. And he's going to help you guys out with the sound. So until next time, happy holidays.
All right. Well, thank you guys very much, and you guys all have a good night.
Yeah, thanks a lot, man.